A time comes when humanity is confined to a massive 140-story bunker. The reason for their hiding and who built it remains unknown, as all information has been wiped out. One day, a man ventures outside and uncovers a shocking truth, raising even more questions. Sheriff Holston removes his badge, sets things in order, and steps out onto the shelter's galleries. No one knows why they're there, who built the bunker, or why the outside world is ruined. There's no clear sign of when it will be safe to return outside. Hello, it's Nacho here. In his office, Holston writes a letter, locks the gate behind him, and throws away the key. He tells his surprised deputy, Marnes, that he wants to join his wife, whose body lies beyond a dusty porthole. Leaving the shelter is akin to a death sentence, voluntary exile. As Marnes processes Holston's decision, he recalls when the couple got permission to have a child. Gloria, an eccentric elderly woman, offered help, but Holston dismissed her, questioning how a childless woman could assist. Now he faces his fate, burdened by memories. Later, a doctor removes a contraceptive capsule from Allison. Now she has a chance to become a mother. Moreover, this is their last attempt. Days begin to count down, but the couple achieves no results. One day, Allison posts an article about deleted files on old storage devices, breaking the ban on restoring relics. She doesn't understand why it's forbidden to post information about materials deleted by rebels. After all, the mayor constantly reminds everyone of the sanctity of history and generational memory, but the law enforcers send anyone found with relics of the past to the mines. Holston asks her to abide by the law, warning that if a handful of violators decide to look at the outside world and open the hatch, the shelter will be doomed. Allison disagrees with her husband, but has other worries as she still can't get pregnant. Freedom Day arrives, a holiday celebrated after the last rebellion. The bunker's mayor is concerned that the external lens is becoming increasingly dirty. On the one hand, this is good, indicating no criminals among the residents who are sent out to clean it. But on the other, people should see the outside world. Meanwhile, Gloria lures Allison into her room, asking about broken servers and burned books, doubting the rebels did it. She informs Allison that she will not be allowed to have children. That same day, Allison receives a work order for the city programmer George's workshop. He greets her enthusiastically, having read her post, and shows her an old hard drive he can't open. Allison takes on the task. The mayor delivers a speech praising the shelter's laws. Exactly 140 years ago, they forbade the rebels from opening the doors to the outside world. The rebels destroyed all information about past life, but the founding heroes saved the remnants of civilization. Allison manages to open the drive, but she is frightened and leaves, asking George to destroy the relic. But he examines the shelter's entire plan and finds a mysterious tunnel at the very bottom. Allison joins her fellow citizens in honoring their ancestors by launching sky lanterns, but her mind is preoccupied with recent events. The next day, Allison visits Gloria to learn why she was denied children. Later, she goes to George, asking him to show her everything. Opening one of the files, the pair is stunned. So this is what's outside. Returning home, Allison receives a doctor's invitation, but Holston waits in vain at the reception. Allison never shows up. The man rushes home and finds his wife sitting at the table. She says that people like her will never be allowed to have children because the leaders want obedient and submissive citizens. She shows him the contraceptive capsule she cut out herself. The doctor deceived them. Seeing the blood, Holston runs for the doctor, but while he is gone, Allison goes to the communal dining room. Accusing the government of hiding the truth about the real situation outside, utters the forbidden words about wanting to leave the bunker. The sheriff has to arrest his own wife. The mayor tries to find a loophole in the law, but finds none. As Allison is prepared for exile, she tells her husband that what they see is just a picture, and in reality, the outside is different. She reminds him that all exiled individuals must clean the external camera lens. If everything is truly dead outside, she won't do it, but if the world is alive, she will wipe the glass, signaling him. The moment of exile arrives. Allison is fitted with a suit, and a special cloth for cleaning the lenses is placed in her pocket. Holston reads the traditional farewell words and cries as he hears his wife's final words, in which she confesses her love for him before stepping outside. Hundreds of people watch her on the monitors. She appears on the screen and cleans the lens. Then she smiles at her stunned husband and walks toward a dried-up tree on the hill. But before reaching it, she collapses and remains motionless. 2 years later, the sheriff learns about the death of programmer George, who moved to the lower level with the mechanics after Allison's exile. The sheriff examines the deceased body and goes to the lower level to talk to a witness, Juliet. Now, sitting behind bars awaiting his exile, he confesses that it was after meeting her that he decided to find his wife, because he is sure the figure outside is not Allison. The day of exile arrives. Holston walks down the long corridor as people gather in the dining hall to witness the sheriff's final moments. When he steps outside, he realizes Allison was right. Everything is green, birds are singing, and the sun is shining. He begins to clean the lens. The viewers rejoice. The ritual is complete. The sheriff heads toward his wife's body, but suddenly feels ill. Amid astonished cries, he removes his helmet and crawls toward the tree, but he collapses beside it. The sheriff's death excites the people, but the law enforcers calm the population. Juliet descends below, screaming in anger, feeling deceived by the sheriff. Meanwhile, Marnes reads Holston's last order to appoint Juliet as the new sheriff. He goes to the mayor, who is very upset, as nothing like this has ever happened in the bunker's history, and while she cannot find a replacement, as Deputy Marnes refuses to take the position, she suddenly realizes she knows nothing about the reasons for the long-ago uprising. Discontent threatens to turn into unrest. The people are massively buying hammers and mallets. Increasingly, street fights break out, which the law enforcers are barely managing. Later, Juliet confides in her friend, repairwoman Marta, that she is sure George was killed because he wanted to show her something during their last meeting. That evening, he attended a repairman's party and arranged a meeting with her, but instead of George, she found a pouch with an unclear relic inside and a note asking her to remember where she had seen this item. The next morning, she learned of her lover's death. After overcoming the initial shock, she reported the programmer's murder. Together with the sheriff, they inspected the crime scene, and the girl was sure George could not voluntarily leave his own life. Everything happened deep in the night, and only couriers could have been witnesses. Holston noticed her watch, but Juliet assured him it wasn't a relic. Later, Juliet shows Holston a toy left by George, but she gives the note in an abridged form. Then she leads him to the lowest levels, where the sheriff had never been and didn't even imagine this place existed. The woman opens a secret passage, the walls of which are covered with writings and drawings made by those who lived here before the uprising. The pair descends an iron staircase into a vast cave beneath the bunker. Juliet turns on the light, and Holston surveys the giant machine standing in the middle of the cave. Apparently, this is an underground combine with which unknown ancestors created this shelter. It was here that Juliet first realized how little they knew about the shelter and its creators. The pair descends to the machine, where George had set up a living space and stored the found relics. Suddenly, Juliet notices a wire stretching somewhere beyond the platform. She pulls it out and finds a bag with a hard drive inside. Next to it are notes made in Allison's handwriting, which the sheriff immediately recognizes. It turns out his wife knew everything that was happening, but said nothing to him. Holston demands the relics be sent to the furnace before anyone learns of their existence, but Juliet objects, which has a sobering effect on the sheriff. He confesses that he cannot pass through the dining hall because the window shows Allison's corpse under the tree. He advises the woman to keep quiet while he finds out the truth. After hearing the story, Marta just shakes her head. Then Juliet admits that she didn't show Holston everything. The note had a continuation. George wrote that he had found what he was looking for, but it is 1,000 times more dangerous than anything before. Juliet leaves, wishing to stay alive. The woman recalls her last conversation with George when he jokingly confessed that the cable bundles on the combine would help him return to the past because the exit from the bunker is underwater. He planned to swim in it, holding onto the rope. The woman goes to the cave and, lowering the rope, descends it to the very surface of the water at the machine's base. Hanging over the abyss, Juliet decides not to risk it and returns to the platform, remembering her deceased friend, and then puts on his watch. In the morning, Mayor Ruth and Marnes set off on their daily bunker rounds. Juliet wakes up to the vibration of dishes, a sure sign of a generator breakdown, and rushes to her workplace. Meanwhile, Marnes notices that Ruth's thermos is leaking and gives her his. Arriving at the scene, Juliet insists on a complete generator shutdown, as if it breaks down, it cannot be repaired. The underground shelter would simply perish. Ruth and Marnes meet with Bernard, the head of the bunker's IT sector, and the second person after the mayor. Bernard is not thrilled about Juliet's candidacy for sheriff. She stole duct tape for her services needs. Chief Judge Meadows is also against it, but Holston chose her. After the conversation, Ruth and Marnes head to the middle level, where the mayor traditionally visits newborns, then talks with Dr. Nicholson, Juliet's father, who says his daughter ended up below because she loved mechanics from childhood, but they do not maintain a relationship. After the conversation, Ruth and Marnes go to lunch. The man confesses he is ready to retire and quietly live with her, but then Judge Sims' assistant appears with his own candidate for sheriff. Meanwhile, the shaking starts again below and Mayor Ruth, descending to the site of the breakdown, witnesses Juliet at work, after which she meets with her and offers her the sheriff's position. Juliet refuses, but the mayor hands her Holston sheriff badge left specifically for her. Juliet finds an engraving on the back of the badge and agrees to take the job, but before leaving, she must fix the generator, which requires shutting it down temporarily. The bunker echoes with a warning that scares the people. Juliet explains to her colleagues what exactly is broken and how to fix it, but they have only an hour to do so. Darkness falls in the bunker. The generator is stopped, external panels removed. Repairmen are lifted to the breakdown site. Juliet finds the broken blade, attaches it, and lowers it down. The rest must be fixed on site. Ruth and Marnes worry about a possible accident. If the generator can't be repaired, groundwater will rise, but will inevitably perish. Ruth confesses she is ready to leave her position and settle next to a retiree. Marnes kisses her. The tension at the generator site escalates. Juliet has to enter the machine to cool it with water. Finally, she manages to set the blade in place. The exhausted Juliet is pulled out and the generator is started. It begins to work properly, causing the entire bunker to rejoice. The lights come on, meaning life continues. After everything, Juliet goes to Marta, giving her the relic George found, asking her to figure out what it is, and says it's time for her to go upstairs to start her new job. She bids farewell to her friends and, turning Holston's badge, reads the word truth on the back. Meanwhile, the mayor signs her resignation. Suddenly, the woman feels unwell and goes to the bathroom. Hearing a fall, Marnes breaks down the door and finds Ruth on the floor with a bloody mouth. At this time, Juliet comes to the mayor's office and witnesses an argument between Bernard, Marnes, and Sims. Marnes is convinced that the criminal wanted to poison him, but he gave his thermos to Ruth. The men notice Juliet. Bernard is forced to appoint her to the position without an oath, as he himself takes the post of mayor without an election. After the conversation, Juliet passes through the dining hall, noticing a lone man sitting at a table when the sheriff's secretary calls her. The woman escorts her to the office and explains the rules here. Juliet asks for George's case file and inspects the office in the cell, from the window of which she can see the tree under which Holston and his wife found their resting place. Then, going to her new dwelling, she again remembers her childhood when she mourned her dead mother and brother, and her father apologized for not being able to fix everything in life. Later, she searches Holston's office and learns that the sheriff left George's case file on his desk specifically for her. And then a message comes about an incident with Marnes. She rushes to the middle level, where the former deputy sheriff is beating a man he suspects of poisoning Ruth. Juliet stops the fight and leads Marnes to the dining hall, where she tells him about her suspicions regarding George's murder and that the sheriff promised to give her a sign if he found something. She shows the sheriff's badge. Marnes agrees to cooperate and takes her to a man named Kennedy, whom he suspects of illegal artifact trading and involvement in the murders, but everything ends in a fight, yielding no explanations. Later, Juliet tries to locate the hard drive George gave to Sheriff Holston. Marnes advises her to check the storage. He then admits that he had enough enemies who wanted him dead. Seeing Ruth's portrait on the wall of his room, Juliet understands the true feelings of the man and agrees to leave her post after they find the mayor's killer. The action shifts to the past when Juliet packed her things and left home, heading down where she handed Marta a note asking to accept her as a repairwoman, allegedly written by her father. The girl ends up in the scrappers team. Every 5 minutes, junk is dumped here, from which useful items need to be found, and it is very hard work. Soon Juliet is called to Marta, where her father is waiting. However, the girl refuses to return, feeling she is in the right place. In the present, Sims visits Marnes and informs him that the judge is ready to remove the new sheriff from her position, to which he reminds him that Juliet was Holston's choice. Meanwhile, she meets a man in the dining hall, and Lucas turns out to be a Shakespeare lover. Marnes, seeing Sims out, remembers Ruth, and then hears the clothesline conversation between Juliet and Marta, where the sheriff admits that she found herself an assistant. Marta reports that she has something interesting to look at. Juliet promises to visit her and heads home, where she notices a strange knocking in the fan. Marnes also goes to his place, where someone attacks him in the dark. The men fight, but the attacker takes Marnes' gun. Juliet, opening the vent grate, finds a package with the real case file of George inside. The woman reads the dossier when she is called to the house of the deceased Marnes, where Sims and the new deputy sheriff Paul already examining his body. Juliet joins them and finds a piece of paper with a list of suspects in the dead man's pocket. Later she proposes burying the couple together. According to the charter, this is not allowed, but on the other hand, the romantic aspect will distract attention from the murders. Then a race to the summit in memory of the mayor will be announced. Ruth and Marnes are buried in one grave. Bernard gives a speech, after which Juliet, with her characteristic bluntness, speaks about her attitude toward her appointment, but she will be faithful to her duty to the end. In the concluding part, everyone bites into an apple, throwing the core into the grave, wishing that a new tree would grow from the remains, giving life. Returning to her office after the funeral, Juliet finds a lawman from the lower level, Hank, who is worried about her, as are all those below. He reminds her that he is always ready to help, but her personal secretary is in no hurry to accept the new boss. Understanding that Juliet agreed to the position only to find out the truth about George's death. Nevertheless, the woman is ready to help if the new sheriff finds the real killer of Marnes, as the judge will pin the crime on whoever comes along. Then Juliet will be ousted, and their person will be put in her place. So the secretary advises, attracting Paul to her side, who knows all the laws. Otherwise, the woman might make a mistake, causing the lawyers not to accept the evidence. Juliet agrees, but, going to the level, lets Paul go for lunch and heads to Kennedy. He is not home, and Juliet breaks the door lock, searches the apartment, and finds a box with poison and a drawing of Ruth that used to hang on Marnes's wall. Meanwhile, Paul goes to Sims, who introduces him to his candidate for his assistance, Doug. In the meantime, Juliet finds Kennedy and takes him to a safe place. Then meets with Paul, who confesses that Sims suspects a man named Ralph. To everyone's surprise, Juliet requests a warrant for Kennedy's arrest. Later, she explains her move to the secretary. Paul got Ralph's name from the lawman, but when Kennedy is searched, they will find the drawing and poison, making the sheriff look incompetent, and they will remove her, putting Paul in her place. She returns to Kennedy's home, where she meets Doug, and accusing him of planting evidence, tries to arrest him, but he runs and Juliet follows. The situation is complicated by the beginning of the race to the summit. In the hustle, Doug throws the woman over the stone railing, but she manages to grab them and hangs over the abyss. Doug tries to pry her hands off. She pulls out a knife, but drops it, and when it seems she will inevitably fall, a girl from the crowd notices what is happening. Doug flees, and passers-by pull Juliet up. Doug goes to Sims. Learning of his failure, Sims asks to see the note prepared for Kennedy, where he writes about wanting to take his own life and throws the man down. Later, Juliet tells the judge everything, and the note found in Doug's pocket confirms that he drew the line himself. The judge thanks the sheriff for her service and orders the case is closed. Bernard apologizes for not trusting her, and Juliet asks for a day off to go down for her things. At night, she again sees Lucas, who draws her attention to the celestial lights, which also move in specific orbits. Juliet asks Marta about these lights, but she has no idea what they are. The woman is concerned about Juliet's safety and talks about the artifact Juliet left her, but she cannot study it in detail because her magnifying glass is too weak, and stronger ones are forbidden by the charter. Marta doesn't understand the ban on improving their living conditions, as they don't even have an elevator, and this artifact threatens them with death. But Juliet doesn't want to abandon her new job until she finds out what happened to George. Deciding to catch the criminal with bait, she goes to the lower cave and takes the artifact from George's drawer. Later, lawmen search Doug's apartment, where Paul finds the same toy dispenser that Juliet once saw in George's stash. They bring the item to the sheriff, and she pretends to see it for the first time. However, Paul reminds her that keeping found relics is illegal, so she must report it to Judge Meadows. The sheriff, Paul, and Sims go to the judge, and on the way, Juliet notices the involuntary movement of her assistant's fingers, which he tries to hide. After hearing the arguments, the judge intends to close the case, but Juliet presents the found artifact and asks for permission to investigate. Sims objects, confident that the item was planted on Doug. To the sheriff's surprise, the lawmen have a catalog of artifacts. They even know the watch on her wrist belonged to George. Nevertheless, Juliet receives permission to investigate. Paul and Juliet go back to Kennedy, who finally names the artifact dealer. The pair arrives at Regina's house, who confesses that she was George's lover. Meanwhile, Sims finds a description of the found toy in the catalog and learns it belonged to George. Juliet is shocked by what she learns, having believed in the man's sincerity. Regina admits that she bought relics for him, and it was the main thing in their relationship. Later, Bernard and Sims visit the station. The latter announces that the item belonged to George, couldn't have ended up with Doug. However, Bernard recalls that Doug was involved in searching the IT guy's rooms, so he could have appropriated the item, and orders the sheriff to stop looking for motives for the mayor and her assistant's murders. Realizing that Juliet planted the dispenser in Doug's room, Paul is outraged. She points out that his condition disqualifies him from holding a responsible position. The man leaves in distress. Juliet goes to the dining hall, where she always meets Lucas. He tries to flirt with her, but she only laughs in response. Later, she calls Marta and announces her decision to give up the badge, having learned the truth about her lover. But her friend reminds her that love drove her to feats, and now resentment makes her give up. So Juliet goes to Regina, sure that she betrayed George to the lawyers, leading to his death. The woman admits she told a lawman about the hard drive after threats to her loved ones, and gives the sheriff a relic that belonged to George's mother, a children's encyclopedia dating back to before the bunker. Juliet examines the book in her apartment, marveling at the photos of animals and nature scenes, unaware that a surveillance group is watching her through cameras installed throughout the bunker. Suddenly she finds a pencil-written name, Gloria, on the back page of the book. She takes the encyclopedia and heads to the medical section to talk to Gloria, where she learns that, by the judge's order, the woman is being drugged. Even in a twilight state, Gloria talks about some waters where her loved ones remain. Meanwhile, a massive brawl breaks out on the lower level. Paul resolves the issues but then expresses his frustration at the sheriff's neglect of her duties. The woman then reveals that all recent deaths were homicides. Paul is surprised and suggests a legal solution for a case review. In the evening, Lucas finds Juliet stargazing and tries to kiss her, but she rejects him. Returning home, she finds descriptions of constellations in the book. The next morning, she goes to Bernard, who admits receiving threats from the judge, who can find a reason to fire the unelected mayor, so he urges the sheriff to find a way to control the judge. Juliet goes to Meadows demanding a chance to talk to Gloria, after which she promises to resign, but the judge makes it clear that nothing depends on her, and she obeys people whose names she cannot reveal. Meanwhile, Sims, switching to Gloria's room, notices flowers obstructing the camera lens. Juliet asks her father for help, who is delighted by her visit. Despite his fears, the doctor takes Gloria in a wheelchair to the nursery ward, where Juliet is waiting. The man gives her injections that counteract her medications, and after some time, Gloria regains clarity. Seeing the book, she tells Juliet that George's mother, like her, was part of the Keepers, a secret group dedicated to collecting and preserving artifacts of the past. The bunker authorities weeded them out, preventing them from having offspring. She also knew Juliet's mother. The Keepers helped her build some kind of magnifier before her husband betrayed her to the bunker. Juliet accuses her father and takes Gloria to a ward, allowing her to admire the book one last time. Gloria notes the absence of flowers which Sheriff Holston brought and placed in front of the mirror. Piecing the facts together, Juliet realizes where the cameras are. She covers the mirror and, knowing Holston checked the ventilation, finds George's hard drive. After Juliet leaves, Sims bursts into Gloria's room and forces her to admit that the sheriff found Holston's stash. He sends his people to search for the sheriff. At the same time, she tries to open the hard drive using her father's computer. This fails, and Juliet recalls how her mother built a microscope through which she discovered a heart defect in a rabbit identical to the condition of Juliet's brother, and realizes that the experience from such an operation could save lives. Receiving a call, she heads to her office, which Sims's people are turning upside down. Paul tries to remind them of the legality of the search, but they do not listen. Juliet remembers a similar search many years ago when lawmen ransacked their home. At that time, the girl's mother accused her father of betrayal and voluntarily handed over the device. Despite her father's vows of innocence, the girl refused to speak to him. In the present, Juliet is forced to present her belongings for inspection. Later, Sims scolds his assistant. They trashed the sheriff's office and found not a single artifact. Juliet and Paul enter, announcing the arrest of the head of security for violating the law. Sims tries to intimidate Paul, but he stands firm in supporting his superior. After Sims is taken away, Juliet searches his office and finds a folder with her mother's case, from which she learns the truth. She goes to her father and apologizes for her suspicions, realizing that the lawmen are simply watching everyone through cameras. Then a nurse announces the arrival of technicians. Juliet understands that the lawmen want to install cameras in this office, and asks to delay them because she hid George's hard drive here. Taking it, she plans to head down, but all the stairs are cordoned off. Meanwhile, Paul goes home, and while trying to help his wife, drops the dishes. His hand failed at the most inopportune moment. At the same time, Lucas receives a note from Juliet and hurries to the meeting. She tells him about the hard drive and asks him to hack it, but Lucas is frightened. Then Juliet breaks the mirror and shows him the camera, explaining that they are being watched. Nevertheless, Lucas refuses to help. Juliet again tries to break through the cordon, but the guards demand to inspect her backpack. Suddenly, Bernard comes to her aid. Juliet trusts him and falls into a trap because Bernard is the one who runs the bunker. Clearly heard her words that the sheriff wants to go outside. Juliet tries to refute his words, but Sims testifies that he also heard her desire. It turns out all the deceased were connected to the most dangerous item for the bunker, the hard drive. Juliet attempts to flee but is quickly caught. Later, Juliet tells Paul that she never intended to go outside. It was Bernard and Sims who slandered her. He advises demanding an investigation. He leads the woman to the station, but she, noticing the onset of an attack, breaks free from his weakening grip and jumps over the parapet. Juliet lands on the lower tier and, regaining consciousness, runs away. Sims accuses Paul of aiding and sends him home. Meanwhile, Bernard notices his keychain glowing and orders the bunker to be turned over to find the fugitive. Paul decides to find Juliet himself. Lawmen begin combing the bunker, and a lower-tier lawman warns Marta about her friend's escape while others search the workshop. Sims and his subordinates burst into Dr. Nichols's office, but he assures them he doesn't know where his daughter is. Sims's wife and son return to their apartment, where the woman sees a broken camera in the corner. Without showing it, she takes the boy to his room. Armed, she begins to inspect the apartment and is attacked by Juliet, who orders her to handcuff herself to a pipe in the kitchen. Juliet then sits at the computer and tries to open the hard drive. Sims reports to Bernard that they found the person to whom Juliet sent a note, and he orders Lucas's arrest. Meanwhile, Paul breaks into Juliet's apartment and finds the encyclopedia in the bathroom. At the same time, Bernard begins interrogating Lucas, who admits that Juliet asked him to open an old hard drive numbered 18. Sims's wife tries to free herself while Juliet, using Holston's wife's notes, finally opens the drive. Bernard orders to find the drive with number 18 in the network. Paul, with trembling hands, flips through the pages, staring at the pictures of an unknown world. Bernard is informed of the living quarters where the drive is connected, and Sims, realizing it's happening in his apartment, rushes there. Juliet opens one of the files and sees a message from George. He learned to do this with an old camera and wants to tell her the truth. His story is interrupted by Sims' freed wife, warning that by connecting the drive to their computer, the sheriff has revealed her location. She needs to flee. A raider group rushes to Sims's quarters when the screens in the monitoring room start to go dark. He bursts into the apartment only to find Juliet already gone. Juliet finds a young but daring IT guy and asks him to open the hard drive in a way that cannot be tracked. The guy gets to work. Paul burns the encyclopedia in his stove, having torn out several pages beforehand. The IT guy opens the file, and Juliet listens to George's confession of true love and that he found the door below. Bernard is informed of the location where the drive is open. Raiders rush there while Sims's wife admits to her husband that she let the sheriff go, reminding him of their common goal, which is not far from being achieved. Juliet opens another file, showing blooming trees and a flock of birds flying outside the bunker. People marvel at the outside world, and the sheriff suggests showing this footage to the entire bunker. But to do this, they need to connect to the main system, which is possible by connecting to the amplifier on the lower level. But lawmen are everywhere. Sims goes to Paul, who explains the search of the sheriff's apartment by his desire to understand why she volunteered for the cleaning. Sims hints that he has long noticed his hand issues. The trio reaches the amplifier and connects the drive, which is immediately reported to Bernard. The observer screens show a beautiful view of the nature surrounding the bunker, and people freeze, staring at the monitors, but Bernard orders them to close their eyes and lower their heads. He then inputs some code into the system, and it shuts down. He orders everyone to forget what they saw when news arrives of the capture of two of Juliet's companions. She has escaped again, and Bernard realizes that the sheriff is moving through the trash chute. Juliet indeed descends down the trash chute, and Sims orders her to be pushed to the bottom, but one of the women raiders warns her and advises diving into the first hatch she sees. Seeing a metal box coming at her, Juliet jumps down, and trash collectors manage to pull her out before she is crushed. They bring her to Marta and treat her wounds, but Juliet's former boss reports the arrival of the lawman and admits he informed on her. The surrounding people are shocked, but the sheriff approves of his actions. The raiders would have found her anyway and would have destroyed everything. Soon, Bernard and Sims arrive. Bernard accuses her of irresponsibility and smashes the hard drive. He is ready to spare her friends if she agrees to go for cleaning and show what happened to George. The woman agrees to the deal. She is led in shackles to the upper tiers while Marta leaves her section for the first time in 25 years to go to the supply department head. Meanwhile, Bernard and Sims bring Juliet to the observation room, ordering to play the recording of George's last hours. She sees that the man jumped down himself to prevent the lawmen from reaching his comrades and helpers. Later, the woman is prepared for cleaning. Her father comes to the cell, but she cannot tell the truth as the camera is being watched. Lucas is sentenced to 10 years of work in the mines for aiding the rebel, and her colleagues from the lower tier send her a box of delicious things, where Juliet finds a note from Marta saying that the supply people are great. Paul is appointed sheriff. On the day of cleaning, Bernard finally answers Juliet's questions. Her troubles began when she delved into George's case, which threatened the existence of the entire shelter, as the truth could explode people's minds. However, Juliet does not understand why it's forbidden to tell that it's safe outside, and that George found a huge steel door at the bottom. Hearing about the door, Bernard ends the conversation and announces the start of the ceremony. The woman says she will not clean the lens, but he reminds her that everyone claims that, and then they all clean. As a last request, he returns her the sheriff's badge. Later, he examines the broken drive, which is only damaged on the outside. Meanwhile, the bunker inhabitants gather in the dining hall, trying to distance themselves from the man who betrayed Juliet. The supply people dress the woman in a suit. Bernard reads the standard formula, and her last words are an assurance of the absence of fear. Juliet heads to the airlock. Stepping outside, she sees the green world, blooming tree, and flock of birds. She realizes the picture is not real. The woman turns to the lens, pulls out the cloth, but drops it. She then heads to the bodies of the Holstons, but she encounters an invisible barrier where the sheriff fell, and realizes that everything around is a hologram. Juliet places the badge where people see the bodies. Bernard exclaims that she knows everything, causing Sims to be puzzled. Juliet climbs the hill where no one has gone before, realizing that the supply people made a special suit for her. Bernard rushes to a secret console, and Juliet sees a devastated Earth instead of a green blooming valley, but looking at her bunker, she leaves beyond the visibility of its inhabitants. The camera moves and zooms out, showing that the bunker's crater is surrounded by dozens of similar craters identical to Juliet's bunker. This concludes the first season. Thanks for watching Nacho's movie recaps. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for updates. Share your thoughts or requests in the comments below. See you next time.